Endometriosis is a chronic illness in which tissue similar to, but not the same as, the lining of the uterus grows on other internal organs, causing scar tissue and adhesions to grow within the body. These adhesions and scar tissue can quite literally stick together organs, adhere organs to the abdominal wall, and cause all-around excruciating pain. Endometriosis affects 200 million people worldwide, and 1 in 10 people assigned female at birth in the United States. It is considered by many credible doctors and organizations, such as the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, to be one of the top 20 most painful medical conditions. Endometriosis has been found on every organ of the body, classifying it as a full-body chronic illness. Its symptoms include painful and extremely heavy periods, pelvic pain, pain during intercourse, digestive issues such as painful bowel movements and bloating, all-around chronic pain, anxiety, depression, infertility, and even more. Despite it being so common and it having such a high pain ranking, endometriosis is very underfunded. Quote, less than 2.5% of publicly funded research is dedicated to reproductive health, despite the fact that 1 in 3 women in the UK will suffer from a reproductive health problem. This is exacerbated by a focus on particular, predominantly male conditions. For example, there is 5 times more research into erectile dysfunction, which affects 19% of men, than into premenstrual syndrome, which affects 90% of women. This is due to the social stigma surrounding the disease, as it is considered a women's health issue and deals with the female reproductive organs. Additionally, although it is so common, those affected have an extremely difficult time being diagnosed, as their symptoms, such as painful periods, are dismissed as normal parts of being a woman. Painful periods have been normalized, when in fact, they are common, but not normal. On average, it takes 7 to 10 years to be diagnosed with endometriosis because sufferers are not believed by medical professionals. The social stigma surrounding painful periods in female reproductive health care, in addition to the underfunding of female reproductive health care, results in a lot of medical gaslighting to those suffering. Gaslighting is defined as manipulating someone by psychological means into questioning their own sanity. There are far too many accounts of individuals suffering from endometriosis who have had their pain doubted or minimized by medical professionals. Being in real pain and having your symptoms constantly minimized by medical professionals, those that are supposed to be assisting a diagnosis, results in longer diagnosis periods and a lot of mental health issues. Those that are suffering constantly doubt their own pain, are afraid to seek help, and are oftentimes not given any help at all. This is absolutely no standard of living. This directly undermines Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care. The act of doubting one's pain, specifically those with female reproductive organs, denies those individuals the right to a standard of living for health care. Medical gaslighting strips endometriosis sufferers from this human right, as social stigmas and personal biases on part of medical professionals keeps them from receiving adequate and effective health care for their disease. Unfortunately, it seems like all odds are stacked against endometriosis sufferers. The social stigma, the underfunding, the lack of awareness. There is no help whatsoever for those that suffer. And with no cure, endometriosis will continue to be one of the most harmful conditions to those born female at birth. I have endometriosis. Like many others in the community, I dealt with medical gaslighting, disbelief, delayed treatment, wrong treatment, and a whole lot of pain before I received my diagnosis via laparoscopic surgery last May. I first started feeling symptoms in 2017, which was 5 years prior to my surgery. That was 5 years of medical gaslighting, trying to figure out what was wrong with me, not being believed by many of my friends and family, and by my medical professionals. For me, it started off with really heavy periods, which I believe to be normal, as the social stigma surrounding periods is that they should be painful and they should be uncomfortable and that they're not fun, when in fact that's not the normal, that's just what a lot of people feel. I started getting really bad cramps randomly in my left side that would leave me on the floor, crippled in pain, and I could not walk. And this was not in correlation to my period or any other event. It would just happen. It would come and it would go very suddenly, and it was excruciating. After I started experiencing those symptoms, I went to my general doctor, and he suggested that I got tested for celiac disease. Knowing that endometriosis ran in my family, I expressed that I was a little bit worried that it could be that, and he brushed it off. So I was tested for celiac disease, which came back negative. After that, Endometriosis was never brought up again, and I went on living my life. When COVID hit, my symptoms began to get much worse. So I had been living with minimal symptoms for about 3 years. And then at the end of June, I began experiencing more bloating, more digestive issues, a lot heavier periods, and the really intense cramps became more frequent. At this point, I finally advocated enough for myself to get an appointment with a gynecologist. When I was at this appointment, I expressed to her that I was concerned that I might have endometriosis as it runs in my family. Without really doing any other testing, she prescribed me birth control. During this time, I was experiencing more and more and more symptoms, and that got worse every single day. There were some days that I was in so much pain that I could do nothing except sit in this bed and do homework. I was constantly in pain. I was constantly crying. I was using heating pads every day to the point where I had burns on my stomach because it was the only thing that would take away remotely any bit of the pain. In November of last year, I switched doctors to a new gynecologist who had really high ratings in the treatment and diagnosis of endometriosis. She switched my birth control and recommended that I try that. Again, same thing happened. Switched to birth control, still experiencing these excruciating pains and bloating constantly, and it was, again, just not fun, and my mental health was severely declining throughout this entire time because during this whole thing, you don't actually know if you're dealing with endometriosis, because the only way that they can formally diagnose you is through surgery and taking biopsies of what they find inside of you. So this entire time you could be treating the wrong illness, or you could be doing the wrong pain management. So it was a very low point in my mental health because I was questioning my pain, I was questioning how I was dealing with my pain, and I was really being questioned by friends and family, and it's hard to explain to others what you're feeling when they're not feeling the same way. And there was a lot of social anxiety that I had, not being able to go out with my friends because I was, for lack of better terms, I was bedridden and I couldn't get out of bed without being in severe amounts of pain. I went back to the doctor in March and explained that my symptoms had not gotten any better and that in fact they were getting worse. She recommended that I have laparoscopic surgery for formal diagnosis and treatment of endometriosis. I took this opportunity and I scheduled surgery for May 12th of 2021. In my surgery, they found some spots of endometriosis lesions. They found a bunch of cysts. It was enough to be causing me that amount of pain. They removed everything that they could, everything that they saw, and I've been in recovery ever since. I'm really happy to say that since my surgery, I've dealt with really minimal symptoms of endometriosis. The surgery is necessary, and it honestly saved my life, because I think that if I were to continue living in that amount of pain for any longer, my mental health would have deteriorated to very drastic lows. It's not healthy to be doubting yourself every day, and it's not healthy to be in that amount of pain every day, and it's not healthy to be alone through all of that. I'm on a lot of Facebook communities, or I follow a lot of Instagram accounts that deal with endometriosis. The amount of gaslighting that occurs in this community it's terrible. It's awful. People go 10 plus years without getting a diagnosis. Just 10 years of dealing with that amount of pain it's not healthy for anyone. And it's so unfortunate that this occurs to the extent that it does. This medical gaslighting, especially in the female reproductive health world, is undeniably a human rights issue, because 1 in 10 people with female reproductive organs in the United States suffer from this disease. 1 in 10 is an extremely significant number for an illness that really isn't known about. There is such a social stigma surrounding periods and period health and women's reproductive health care that it's gross and it's taboo and it's just not talked about. But it needs to be talked about if this amount of people are suffering every single day. Staying silent about it is what makes it a human rights issue. And more needs to be done in terms of decreasing the stigma surrounding female reproductive health care and increasing the amount of funding that it gets so that better cures can be found for issues such as endometriosis, which currently does not have a cure. So more strides need to be taken by everyone to normalize female reproductive health care, to normalize talking about periods. They're not gross. Every single person that has female reproductive organs goes through it, and that's like half of the world population. It's not a taboo subject. It's quite literally one of the most basic functions of human life. I would urge all of you to try to normalize this conversation, whether that be with your friends or your family or with your doctors, just talking about the quote-unquote uncomfortable topics such as reproductive health care. So please advocate for yourselves. Do not be afraid to express how you're feeling. Do not keep your pain a secret. Advocate for yourselves. Speak up.